welcome back. We're on the Do More podcast, and it's just a series of conversations here to invite guests, partners, colleagues, friends to come and share with us their lessons and learnings, their thoughts and reflections on their work in the development space and the ECD sector. So today I have Tshepo Mantjé.
Yes.
I didn't butcher that. And recently found out the man appreciates Christmas.
Love Christmas. So it's the most wonderful time of the year.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging me with that. So just such a privilege to have you here with us. Thanks for sharing so authentically. And we have an unscripted episode for our listeners today on why ECD, why young children, why we are so determined to put young children on the map. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I think so often we skim over it and there's a lot of depth to it. So
before we jump into the conversation, I have a fun question for you in true Do More style. I've been here often enough to know how we work.
Cool. Hit me.
The question for you can answer at the end, so you can think about it, is if you were to lend your voice to any device, like, you know, when like Siri speaks, or in the elevator there's the voice, or in the car navigator, what would you lend your voice to? What kind of device mechanism would just be like, dee dee?
Cool.
Okay. Think about that and we'll return back to
that. Yeah.
While you think about that, I would like to know, how were you introduced to early childhood development and how did you end up in the space?
So ECD, I studied social work in my undergrad. I loved working with young children throughout my whole high school and just like adolescent life, loved babysitting and getting involved in families. I was incredibly privileged in the community that I was in through my church community, actually, to really understand the value that families play within community lives and how you don't necessarily have to belong to a family to benefit from what that family gives off, that energy, that wisdom, safety, belonging, all of it can be fostered within a community. And I was really passionate about getting involved in, at the time, I thought teenagers. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
And I went to university, studied social work, and along my journey, also through just discovering developmental theory, looking at the children that I was working with through my practicals, discovered my heart for community work and specifically group work. So that was really where my passion came for. Not really one-on-one interventions, but more macro, meso-level work, which from a social work perspective is actually not the glamorous version. It's the road less traveled. I think I was saying this to you earlier today. People would say to me, I don't know about the social work career for you, and particularly community, but actually it just felt so true to who I am. And anyway, went and did my master's in ECD on parent education, and that really just sparked this world for me around young children and the importance of the first 1,000 days. Wrote my first parent program, had some amazing experience in the training space, and got to know the practitioners and the principals, these incredible women who are leaders in their own right. Met Pam, actually, Pam Picken, who seems to have got a nice shout out in one or two of these episodes. She's probably beaming right now. Shout out to Pam.
Love Auntie Pam.
Yeah. So I was so new on the on the ECD scene, trying to find participants for my research study, as any true researcher would, and somehow landed up at Pam's house, and she gave me this list a mile long. Many of you who are probably listening to this podcast were on that list, and I was like, I don't know who these people are. What's tree? Who are these people? What's Elru? And so really starting from the ground up, figuring out the landscape, and I was very fortunate to have mentors along the way who invested in my ECD passion, and fell in love with the sector. So
as we're talking about what is why ECD, let's start with what is ECD. and sort of ground us in a definition.
Sure.
How do you understand what ECD is?
Yeah, and I mean, I'd so welcome your build on this. ECD is it's a misconceived concept so often, where people think it's all about preschool, but actually, or creche, right? But actually, ECD is a period of time. It's the first 1,000 days of a child's life and beyond. So it's that conception all the way to 6 years, and in that period, nutrition, responsive caregiving, and stimulation are so critical. And that is ECD. ECD is this interrelated, connected, nurturing care that is required for a child to meet their optimum development.
Yeah.
Somehow that's summarized in ECD.
Yes.
And I don't know if you have any builds on that.
I think perhaps not even a build, but emphasis on how you have put it in terms of it being a period of time and not an institution. Early childhood development is not a place, an institution, a person, or a teacher. It's a period of time. So in understanding it that way, we understand that children in that period of time are going through a lot of changes. One of the major changes to know in that time is that in the brain, there are cells called neurons in the brain. And how these work is going to get a little bit scientific, but I'm going to make it as accessible as possible.
Nice.
So we have these, think of them as highways in your brain, where cars travel on the highway, on a road in your brain. And when we are young, in the first 1,000 days, we are building these highways. And then there are these cars, these neurons that are firing through, delivering messages from one part of the brain to the other, sort of interpreting how the body is working, what the body is engaging with. And what research shows us about this period of time, particularly in the first 1,000 days of the child's life, that's around 2 to 3 years old, that is when most of the brain highways are being created.
For sure.
So every other car that is going to drive across the child's brain for the rest of their life is going to drive on a highway that was created at this important time of their lives. So ECD is this time where the ground is so fertile in the child, in a way, for you to plant all the seeds that we need to plant to create, and I'm mixing metaphors now, but to create an individual who in the future is able to use these neural pathways that have been formed as a child. It is not to say that our neural pathways stop developing. There's something called neuroplasticity, which tells us that the brain is always forming new connections, but it is particularly important in the early years of the child's life. So with this knowledge, ECD then creates spaces for children to stimulate their learning, to give them proper nutrition, to give them nurturing care, so that they are in an environment that allows them to grow. And this is just the brain development. There's also the physical development of the child. In those first 1,000 days or 6 years, that is when they are growing the most physically. They're learning how to move, fine motor skills, gross motor skills. And all of that time is just so important. Yeah. So when we're seeing a child just chilling, gallivanting in the streets in the middle of the day with no supervision, particularly in this first 6 years of their lives, there is an injustice really from us as a community that knows that child is right now learning and developing, for us to not get them into a center.
Yeah, sure. Do you know what's really striking me about what you're saying is the consequence of inaction, the consequence of not capitalizing, of investment into this period has massive consequences, and yet we're seeing that in action all across the country, where children are not accessing early learning centers, nutrition is not being provided, parents are struggling to connect with their children for various reasons, and there's actually a toxic stress, right, in a country where poverty is very real. Now we ask these children to grow, and that's putting them on the back foot actually in that period, right?
Yeah. What has been some of the challenges that you have faced in terms of people not understanding ECD? Where do you think there's a block in people understanding? Because everyone has seen a child.
Sure.
And we know that
seen them grow.
Everyone has seen a child grow. Yeah. And we have seen, without even the scientific knowledge and the research of ECD,
yes,
we are amazed at how quickly children get language, understand language.
Sure.
We are amazed at how quickly children understand gadgets.
Yes.
Right? And so we have this understanding that these kids are absorbing. But what are people not really understanding about
Sure.
the importance of ECD?
I think there's a huge misconception that learning and real growth only happens when the child goes to school. There's this focus, emphasis, misunderstanding that when my child goes to school is when I need to really dial up the attention and the investment. So we hear that a lot from parents, like, oh, when my child gets to grade 1, I'll do X, Y, Z. But actually that needed to have happened years prior. I also think people misunderstand play. And I think if, as a society, we really embraced play, even as a business, as organizations, if we really embraced play, we would better understand children and better understand ECD and how children playing is learning. And we should be encouraging that. But historically, it was children must be seen and not heard. Children must not be a menace. Children need to be full and sleeping by 12 o'clock. There's all these expectations placed on children. And that is also an injustice, actually, on children not being given the space to play and learn. So I think when we get all passionate and fired up about ECD, it's because we see this missed opportunity.
Yes.
And yes, university period is important. Adolescence is important. Primary school is important. But what we see is all of that could be exponentially greater, easier, more improved, whichever angle you want to take, you're going to see better outcomes over a longer time horizon if you've invested early. This is basic investment.
Yeah, basic. Ecos 101.
Ecos 101, exactly. Don't ever let the social worker go Ecos 101. But yes, but the concept, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we spend a lot of time advocating for investment, particularly with businesses and funders and investors and then even parents themselves to say, now is the time to be getting angry about the fact that you're not getting services in your community. Not when the child is 7, when the child is 6 months.
Yeah.
So
I resonate with that because you're right in terms of communities and parents believing that learning is only starting at 7 years old when they go to grade 1.
Sure.
And I think there's a space for organizations like ours to teach parents about that and provide that knowledge to them and teach confidence.
Totally.
I think, about because maybe parents are in a position. I say maybe because I'm not backed by research here, but maybe parents might be in a position where they might not be confident in what they have to teach.
You say it's not researched, but self-efficacy in parenting is critical. That's self-mastery of, I can do this. This confidence.
That's particularly what
that is
exactly.
it. Loads of research.
Okay.
Back yourself.
Yeah. But I guess I was talking from anecdotally what I see, right?
Sure.
They're sort of waiting for the teacher to come to say, this is how you read. This is how you open a book. But, parents, allowing them to stand in their power to say, you as a parent, you are the primary expert on ECD.
Correct.
Everyone else is taught ECD.
For sure. And you know your child better than anyone.
Yes.
You're the one who will know that this child needs health services. You watch them over time. And so I think putting that agency back into the hands of parents is so critical.
Can we return back to our question?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, so let me remind you.
Yes.
The question is, if you were to lend your voice to any electronic device that is voice assistance, what device would it be?
What thought came to my mind is the remote, like for a car or a gate or whatever. I'd be that thing that goes open, close. I'm here because everyone loses their keys, right? And I feel like that's incredibly practical thing to add a voice to.
That's a good one. I've always thought...
I may regret listening to this later.
I always thought we should just attach something to our keys that we can call.
Totally.
I spend too much time looking for keys.
Yes, correct. I'll add my voice to it and it's done.
Thank
cool.
you.
Thanks for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me and thank you for letting me take a little bit of the lead this time.
So fun.
Playtime.